What makes a game fail? Is it sometimes death by 1,000 cuts? Tiny, seemingly insignificant things that developers either don't notice or define as tolerable? Could it also be massive missteps in management, gross negligence to an existing fan base, or overzealous marketing departments unconcerned with the long-term effects of misleading hype or outright false advertising? This video is for the gamers that have been burned. The gamers who want to hope again, who want to feel the excitement and anticipation of an upcoming game, but guard their emotions so they won't be disappointed. Starfield is coming. Fans are excited, but there is a subgroup of gamers who feel hurt, lied to, and betrayed due to their experience with Bethesda Game Studios. These gamers hate Starfield because of Fallout 76. My goal is not to discount their hurt or even make excuses for Bethesda, but I do want to advocate there is reason for hope. They don't have to miss out on the joy and excitement of anticipating a new game along with their fellow gamers. Is Bethesda unredeemable? Let's talk about it. If you are between 25 and 45 years old, you probably grew up with video games. I have a ton of great memories from my childhood, and I bet you do too. Thinking about games back then overwhelms me with nostalgia. Going to the local video rental store, running to the sidewall with my brothers to look for the newest games, and then playing them all night long with the volume level on 3 so our parents wouldn't hear. Back then, you chose your games based on a Nintendo Power article and your gut reaction to the box art. Gaming has indeed changed a lot since the good old days, for better and for worse. I don't want to seem just like an old man yelling at the clouds here. There are obvious improvements in technology and leaps forward in creative storytelling. But are these improvements worth the cost? Unfortunately, there is a dark side of the games industry that has grown exponentially since the mid-2000s. This can mostly be summarized by pointing to corporations and how they have fiercely and unabashedly traded passion for profit, all while neglecting the trust of their gamers and brushing their love for games under the rug as collateral damage as they increase profits. However, you could make an argument that due to the greed of these corporations, they have improved the viability of the gaming industry as a whole. With more financial stability and growth, we get faster implementation of new technology, more creatives coming into the field bringing their passion and talents with them. The graphical improvements we've seen in gaming, even in the past decade, are mind-blowing. The mechanics and feel of games has grown more and more sophisticated. The level of narrative storytelling in games has long surpassed Hollywood movies. Would these advances in the industry be possible without the influx of capital these publishers and corporations have engineered? Starfield was officially announced to the world back in 2018 during Bethesda's E3 press conference. This was largely a footnote at the time, as most Bethesda fans were excited about the soon-to-be-released Fallout 76, and then eagerly anticipating the next mainline entry into the Elder Scrolls series, which was also teased directly after Starfield. Excitement didn't really start building for Starfield until June of 2021, when they dropped the official teaser trailer with the game's original release date. After this, they put out a steady stream of content over the next year to entice fans and build up hype. But nothing with too much detail or explanation about the game. It wasn't until the end of the Xbox Bethesda Showcase in 2022 when we got our first good look at Starfield. This is what most of us have been excited about for months now. Just as fans started praising the game's ambitions and dreams, others warned of impending disappointment and broken promises. These were the victims of the troublesome Fallout 76 launch. So what happened between 2018 and 2022 that caused so much cynicism and vitriol in a once thriving and committed fan base? In short, Fallout 76 was a complete misfire. While I don't want to expound upon every single fault of 76's launch, I do want to acknowledge a few of the main issues that contributed to the intense backlash Bethesda received from fans. Number 1, overall bugginess and performance of the game. Bethesda is certainly known for having a plethora of bugs in their games upon release. The nature of their vast worlds and deep systems unfortunately lend itself to a certain level of bugginess until the games can be played at scale with millions of players and bugs can be reported. In Bethesda games in the past, this is merely presented as visual bugs, characters occasionally getting stuck in their pathing, or objects falling through the game world, and the rare glitch that actually breaks a quest or item. I would argue that very rarely would we see legitimate game-breaking bugs that weren't addressed quickly by the development team. Contrast this with Fallout 76's launch. There were exponentially more bugs that caused for a really rough and choppy player experience, and not just the occasional humorous bug. The game was riddled with glitches that made playing the game a chore, and server issues made some areas of the game outright unplayable. The game was more of a mess than even Bethesda's most loyal fans could take. And this quickly led to a swarm of refund requests, which did not go well at all. We'll come back to that later. Number 2, the game was a literal wasteland, empty and boring. The original design concept of the game must have sounded great in the first boardroom meeting at Bethesda. A game where players get to decide the story and build the world. It's an RPG fan's dream. But eventually they wrapped that meeting and never came back to the realization that most gamers need structure and direction, at least to start with. The story was told solely through taped recordings you found along the, air quotes, story path, and never lived up to the storytelling Fallout fans expected. In addition to having virtually no NPCs to give the game character, shape, and tone, Fallout 76 leaned too heavily on the barren environment to shape players' experience, and, unfortunately, it did just that, provided an empty and desolate place for players' interest to die. Number 3, marketing and public relations. This was honestly the nail in the coffin for a lot of players. In a strange way, I can understand how everything else could have happened. A game studio trying something completely new and just missing the mark. That is within the realm of understanding. But how Bethesda initially responded to and treated their players was surprisingly trashy. I just want to mention 2 things here. The first, I mentioned earlier, refunds. Once players experienced the completely unacceptable and, more importantly, unplayable state of the game at launch, many wanted a refund. Many of these players asking for a refund had only just launched the game and discovered after a few hours of trying to play, the game was broken. Bethesda's policy at the time was no refunds would be issued once the game was downloaded. This, of course, made fans furious. But then reports started coming out that players who got in direct touch with a support team member were issued refunds. This was a win for these specific players for sure, but only added more confusion to the situation as a whole, as Bethesda's policy had not changed, and most players were still refused refunds. The situation became so bad and so public that a law firm out of Washington, D.C. started investigating the situation for a potential class action lawsuit for unfair trade practices. The second thing I want to mention in regard to marketing and public relations is Baggate. If you're not familiar with this, I recommend checking out Yangya's coverage of the issue. But to quickly sum up the issue of this horrible display of public relations and customer service, Fallout 76 had a Power Armor Special Edition of the game available for purchase. This edition of the game cost $200 and was supposed to include the game as well as special edition in-game items, plus a map, figurines, wearable helmet, and a canvas duffel bag, and this is where it goes bad. Players started reporting they did not receive the advertised and promised canvas bag in their special edition bundle, but instead received a very cheap nylon bag. Okay, that's bad enough and obviously false marketing. When players reached out for an explanation, They received responses from support like, the canvas bags were too expensive to make, and we're not going to do anything about it. After this downpour of gasoline on an open fire, Bethesda finally took to Twitter to reassure everyone they understood their frustration, but not to worry, because they were giving all of these players something far better than a canvas bag. They were getting 500 atoms, the Fallout 76 microtransaction currency. Oof, yeah. This story actually has a few more twists and turns, but suffice it to say, Bethesda did eventually deliver the promised canvas bags to special edition owners. However, at this point, the damage was done to their reputation, and here we are, almost 5 years later, still trying to heal from this blatant show of disrespect to their community. With these things in mind, let's ask the question a second time. Is Bethesda unredeemable? Many players certainly think so, but as I mentioned earlier, I think there are reasons to hope in a better future for Bethesda, and specifically for Starfield. Now, many of you might say I'm being naive, and that may be true, but let me offer some of my reasoning on why I'm betting on the launch of Starfield being a success, and the start of Bethesda's road to redemption. Number 1, focused development. In light of Microsoft's acquisition of Bethesda back in 2021, Starfield is now an exclusive of the Xbox ecosystem. While this does of course include development of PC and cloud, Xbox's development philosophy is designed to make these transitions as easy as possible. And while true, Starfield's development did technically start in 2015, much of the weight of developing for multiple platforms is found in the optimization stages, which they would not have entered until 2021 at the very earliest. Starfield will be using an updated version of Bethesda's creation engine, which was already designed for Xbox development. This ability to focus on developing for one console has most likely led to more streamlined optimization, a focused approach to QA testing, and overall stability of the game. Number 2, the A team. Fallout 76's development was spearheaded by a different development team, Bethesda Austin, with a different game director, Jeff Gardiner, who is no longer with the company. Bethesda Austin was formerly known as Battlecry Studios as a subsidiary of ZeniMax Media. In 2015, they were pulled off of the Battlecry game and focused their efforts on modifying and restructuring the creation engine to work for the massive online world of Fallout 76. Earlier in 2018, before the launch of 76, they were rebranded as Bethesda Game Studios Austin. Other ZeniMax developers did assist in the development of 76 as well. These included id Software, Arcane Studios, and ZeniMax Online Studios. With the original Bethesda Maryland studio leading the charge in Starfield's development, we can expect the ongoing standards to be much higher and the QA to be much tighter. Furthermore, Todd Howard himself is leading the development as game director. Todd has mentioned before he has been dreaming about making Starfield for a long time, and finally started working on it in 2013 when the name Starfield was trademarked. As a personal passion project of Howard's, he and Bethesda's most experienced and talented developers are sure to put everything they have into the game's development and not settle for the bare minimum just to get the project launched. Number 3, playing to their strengths. While this is a new frontier as far as the galactic scope of the game, creating single-player, story-driven sandboxes are one of Bethesda's core strengths. Fallout 76 was a brand new design concept with a whole host of unique problems the team had little expertise for handling. Even though Starfield will consist of multiple planets stretching all across the galaxy, all of these are contained within a similar game design the Bethesda team is very familiar with. Eliminating all of the problems that an MMO brings into development has surely helped the development process in speed, stability, and depth. Number 4, acknowledgement of mistakes. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video game industry is certainly no stranger to the insensitivity and greed of publishers and corporations. It seems that anytime a misstep is made on a major release, gamers are met with a tone-deaf tweet filled with insincere PR scripted drivel. As we just noted, Bethesda themselves were guilty of this in responding to the very legitimate player concerns with Fallout 76. So what makes me think this time will be any different with Starfield? To be honest, this one is a bit complicated. I think the development team learned some really good lessons and will err on the side of caution and will push to delay at the expense of sales if necessary. I think the marketing and PR teams have learned some good lessons about how to simply be more clever and less obvious. One of these is good. I'll let you guess which one. Let's start with the good. After the launch of Fallout 76, Howard got blasted. Interview.
Got a lot of criticism, obviously, that looking back, we deserve.
After interview.
Had a lot of difficulties at launch.
After interview.
You don't want to read that, but it is what it is. And again, we deserved a lot of that.
And he took it on the chin and apologized to gamers. He definitely approached it from a developer's perspective, but he wasn't callous to the plight and frustration players had experienced. He owned that his team had let people down, and he genuinely wanted to improve the game to win them back, not just to save face. Contrast this with another well-known critical and commercial flop, Anthem. Anthem was the next big IP from BioWare and EA. BioWare, known for crafting story-rich RPGs with compelling characters and fantastical worlds, was tasked with developing an always-online shared world multiplayer action game. Makes perfect sense. Without getting into the weeds, Anthem bounced off of the reviewers and players hard. The story was disconnected and all but absent from the moment-to-moment gameplay. There were no interesting characters with internal motivations, and there was no depth to the gameplay. In short, Anthem had no soul, no identity. It was even rumored that the different development departments who worked on the game really didn't have a good idea of what they were making and what the big picture was. Anthem was released in February of 2019. By May of that year, it was evident players were not sticking. By February of 2020, BioWare announced they were looking to substantially reinvent the core game. In May, it was revealed that only a team of 30 were working on this rework, causing much doubt of BioWare's and EA's sincerity on the project. And of course, a year later, in February 2021, it was announced development would stop on Anthem. This game that was in development since 2012 from a beloved developer barely had a 2-year lifespan. This past October marked 76's 4th year since release. And believe it or not, it still has a thriving community of dedicated players. Bethesda could have just as easily made up some BS about changing markets and ongoing technology expenses and shut the project down. But they didn't. They stuck it out, went through the difficult process of owning up to their mistakes, listening to the community, and then designing a new vision of the game around what the players wanted. They shouldn't have made the mistakes in the first place, sure, but I absolutely respect them for their commitment to the players and to the Fallout brand. Okay, the other thing, marketing and PR. I really think these are the teams that screwed players over the most. There weren't any technology challenges here, there weren't any deadlines that mandated a loss in quality. Their decisions were made from poor leadership and a total lack of respect for players. And I'd also like to add, a lack of respect for the development team. Pete Hines, the Vice President of Global Marketing and Communications for Bethesda Softworks, leads and approves all of the marketing and PR for Bethesda games. He and his team seem to live in a different world than the rest of us, and often intentionally isolate themselves from the troubles of development. Regarding how the development team was trying to turn Fallout 76 around and recreate it into a great experience for players, Hines said in an interview, "Ultimately, it's down to the team. Communication is great, but if the game isn't improving, then it really doesn't mean anything." I guess Pete thinks how they treat loyal Bethesda fans who trusted them enough to spend $200 on their game doesn't mean anything. It's all the developer's responsibility, really. Glad to know you're here for the community, Pete. And yes, that is sarcasm you hear in my voice. So, do I trust Todd Howard and the development team? Yes, not unequivocally, but yes. I think Todd's been intentionally more restrained in his public excitement about the game, largely due to the responsibility he knows he has to fans to deliver on that excitement. Do I trust Pete Hines and the marketing and PR teams? No. I know this video is all about hope, but I'm also a realist, and there's no reason to accrue more risk than you need to. I'll go ahead and say right now, for the record, I strongly recommend not to purchase pre-orders. Do not pre-order Starfield, especially if they come out with some kind of special edition bundle with a wristwatch or a telescope or some kind of gimmick. And finally, rounding the last point on why I think Starfield's launch will be a success, number 5, Bethesda's new relationship with Xbox. Even before the acquisition in 2021, Xbox and Bethesda have enjoyed a very healthy working relationship, all the way back to the release of Oblivion on the Xbox 360. Actually, after the launch of Fallout 76, as all the problems started to rise to the surface, Phil Spencer was one of the first calls Todd Howard made. Todd was asking for advice on how to turn the game around, and Phil was able to get him in touch with the right people and teams to start the long road of recovery. But now, Xbox owns Bethesda, and just as importantly, Xbox owns Bethesda's IP, The Elder Scrolls, Fallout, Starfield. Xbox paid $7.5 billion for all of these names to be in its house. And Xbox has a large vested interest in their long-term success. This means with a big loss so fresh in the minds of fans, Xbox has every reason to grant Bethesda as much runway as they need to make sure Starfield is a grand slam, not only for the sales that Starfield will generate over its long life, but for the continued value of their investment in Bethesda and their other brands. Xbox's entire strategy right now is focused on infrastructure and winning the future of the games industry. They know the world is watching with Starfield. Xbox needs this to be a win just as much as Bethesda, and they have as much money and as much time as it takes to get it right. So with the major failures of Fallout 76 in mind, coupled with these reasons why I think Starfield will succeed, let's come back to our original question. Is Bethesda unredeemable? I don't think so. Like all of us, they've made mistakes, missed the mark. We could all play back moments in our head right now when we said something we shouldn't have, or when we did something that we still need to apologize for. And yes, Bethesda is a game studio, but it's still made up of people just like you and me. People who are trying to make awesome games, tell great stories, and find ways to inspire hope in a new generation. We all have those memories of our childhood with games. What if Starfield can create some of those memories for young gamers? What if Starfield could rekindle that fire, rediscover that hope that was lost in us? What if in another 25 to 30 years, we look back at today and think, those were the good old days. Thanks for watching, and may you find wonder as you journey through the stars.